And definitely a lot to enjoy as far as football is concerned. The NFL draft is something we're coming up off of. And I know you and I both had a chance to watch the draft. Steve, how do you like the overall, before we get into the picks, how do you like the draft presentation? Do you like the Thursday, Friday, Saturday deal, or what's your thoughts, man?
Yes, but here's the thing. I wish the first round didn't take, was it 8 minutes, 10 minutes? Like when they know how much time is left on the clock, or I mean, excuse me, when they know who they're picking, just go ahead and throw it in there. Let's move this show along. I know it's ESPN. They got to make it last 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. But I wish they would hurry up. What do you think? You got to feel the same way.
Yeah. It's the thing that because the first round now is just this one night event, you know that it's going to be, I mean, dude, I remember, I'm going to get on my old man deal here, but I remember, watching the draft as a kid when, they do it all in 2 days and you could get through the first 3 rounds in, 6-7 hours. Supposed to now, it's 3.5 hours just for the first damn round. So that is a bit of I don't want to say a struggle, but it's a production now. It's a production, right? And with that being said, one of the things that we took notice of their production is that two of the top 3 picks. I'm out of rhythm. You don't do this podcast every week. And all of a sudden I'm tripping over my words here. Non-Power 5 picks. What are your thoughts on that, Steve, just in general?
I think that's great, because obviously we cover majority G5, but all things quarterbacks. And so we're always rooting for the guys kind of underlooked. And by no means were Zach Wilson and Trey Lance underlooked in the draft, but it's fair to say 2 years ago they were underlooked, right? A year ago they were underlooked before the season actually happened. So, I mean, I don't know if that's probably not going to be the norm moving forward, but we always see at least one of these guys that got kind of under-recruited, if you will, in high school, tend to be one of the top guys picked at the quarterback position. So it's nice to see 2 of them, 2 out of 3. Now, if it was me, would I have picked a certain quarterback over those 2? Hell yeah, but I don't get paid that money, and so, good picks regardless.
Steve, I want to ask you this really quick. I definitely want your thoughts on this. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, I know a lot of the talk was about A, level of competition, but B, a small sample size. Trey Lance obviously did not start a ton of ball games at the FCS level. Zach Wilson, if you take away this year, and you can say about a lot of guys, say about Joe Burrow, but if you take away this year, certainly didn't look like a guy who's going to be a top 5 pick. Thoughts on that?
So I've heard this narrative of people talking about both of them. I'll start with Zach Wilson first. So 2 years ago, I don't have the stats put up in front of me. His stats obviously weren't nearly as good as they were this past year. He was playing tougher competition. They're playing more Power 5 schools. And then when you come to 2020 and the COVID year with all the different games canceled and like conferences playing only in conference besides for some of the smaller conferences for the most part, the level of competition went down. And so they weren't playing these bigger schools, so you put up these huge numbers. So I've heard that narrative surrounding Zach Wilson, which helped him put up big numbers and get to become a second-round pick. And, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with that narrative that's out there. And then with Trey Lance, I think it's just the fact that he was so good that year and showed so many qualities that could be transferred to the NFL that it was worth the pick. And what I also heard, you may have heard this too, that Trey Lance was probably the best the quarterback to be interviewed in all these big interviews. I think he right. So that's a big deal too.
My big 2 cents is this, I think especially with the draft itself, some of it is about production and some of it is about projecting what a guy is going to do going forward in his development, right? And I don't know which camp you fall in. I normally am the type of guy who would like to see, a quarterback do it, or a player, or I don't care what position, do it over an extended period of time. However, I do understand that when you're choosing the number 1 position in all of sports and you have a guy who you say he has a set of skills that we think we can, maybe craft and mold and, refine them and kind of get that boom. I understand it. And like I said, we won't get too far into P5 versus G5, but I do think a guy like Justin Fields, my personal opinion, yes. Hey, it's definitely the Bears game. And I would have chosen him maybe over the other 2 guys, but I respect the fact that, and I think going forward, especially when we talk about, later on this podcast, guys like Malik Willis trying to project where they may go, it helps, kind of open those doors. You can go back to the days of Dante Culpepper, cheap UCF plug here, but non-P5. At the time, there was no P5 or G5 back then. It was just 1A and 1AA, and UCF was a 1A team. So, but yeah, he was one of the first small school guys, to go top 5, top 10. So definitely an interesting topic there. Anything else you got on that, Steve? Or, you want to go into
I'm totally with you that Justin. I mean, like we talked in the last pod, like Justin Fields is, he's. I won't get into it, but he was definitely someone I thought should have been considered higher. But like I said, those two guys are good quarterbacks too, and hopefully all have good careers.
Keeping it with the quarterbacks overall, you look at 10 quarterbacks drafted this year. 13 drafted in 2020. Each year, probably going to get about 10 or 11. You go back and track the years. But this year, no G5 quarterbacks. 2020, there were G5 quarterbacks. 2019, no. 2018, yes. 2017, no. 2016, yes. So I guess that means 2022 will be a yes, right? You go off on. However, I mean, listen, and here's just my 2 cents before I pass it to you, Steve. Some of that is going to be circumstantial, right? Because when you look at P5 quarterbacks, and whether or not you want to believe that those players are more talented at that level, it's open for debate. However, you're probably going to get a higher turn. I mean, they're just, it's not that they're more P5 teams, forgive me for not having the exact breakdown, but in terms of turnover, you're going to have a guy who may be, more easily projected to be a NFL draft pick from a Power 5 school, right? That's what I'm trying to say there. Whereas at the G5 level, not only the quarterback, but the team around him, it's going to take a lot of things coming into play for that guy to get that shine that he should. Say if you don't have like the physical tools of a Trey Lance or Zach Wilson. So with that, Steve, I'll let you take it away as far as your thoughts on the fact that no G5 quarterbacks were drafted this year. Were you surprised? Were there any guys that you thought, maybe had an outside shot that didn't end up getting drafted?
I think the only one I considered maybe that could get drafted was Shane Buechele right now. So I don't think I'm surprised this year. Next, I know we'll get into 2022. Next year, we should have several G5 guys get drafted. But no, I don't. There wasn't like one guy who you for sure thought was like last year we had James Morgan. Like you knew he was going to get drafted. You didn't know if it was going to be 4th, 5th, 6th. We didn't know what round, but you were pretty confident he was going to get drafted. This year, there was really no guy you thought was going to get drafted. I know Buechele signed as undrafted free agent with the Chiefs, but besides that, there's no other G5 quarterback that signed, undrafted free agent deals. Actually, we have several guys in camp going to rookie camp, but that's not an actual free agent deal. So I wasn't too surprised with this year's class. Maybe I would have thought more of the guys could sign undrafted free agent deals, but when you have like guys like Damian Newman who didn't get drafted, then those guys are going to sign over some of the other group of 5 quarterbacks that did not get drafted.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Buechele, and he was the only undrafted free agent. Then you have Brady White is in rookie camp with Tennessee, and Zach Smith to the Bills. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not surprised they're getting a shot like Brady White. I thought Zach Thomas might. I mean, maybe he will get a shot at camp. I don't know yet, but as of now, like those are the 2 guys you probably would think would get a shot. Brady White because of the numbers he put up, and Zach Smith because of the kind of NFL build that he has. So I'm glad they're getting shots. I'm surprised Zach Thomas hasn't gotten anyone yet, and there's probably a few other guys that I'm just blanking on that I would think would at least get a camp invite, but haven't yet.
A really quick thought here as far as Shane Buechele, and I just kind of think in your mind, who does he remind you of? I know I sent you a list of quarterbacks and a list of all prospects where those guys were comped between this guy and that guy. Shane Buechele, who did if you had to kind of pick an NFL comp, who would he remind you of?
So this is going to be a big cop out, and it goes up the list that you sent me, but I think it's a perfect comp.
And go ahead and make sure you shout out the author of that. It should be Thor Nystrom.
Okay. Well, you say I'm gonna have
is
you.
It Thor?
Yeah, Thor Nystrom. Yep, Thor Nystrom.
There we go. All right. Yep.
So these are his rankings or his kind of comparisons, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So he compared Shane Buechele to Case Keenum, and I think it's a perfect comparison. Just a gunslinger, just throwing it all around, and can move a little bit, right? And of course, both from the great state of Texas. No surprise there, Eric. But I think it's actually a pretty good comparison. Do you have someone a bit different or what
no? Listen, there's a reason I sent you that article because I thought Thor knocked it out of the park. He does a great job every year as far as his comps. I mean, he goes all the way down, from quarterback to kicker, and really does a great job, spot on as far as when you look at him, no cop outs, no guys always like, all right, he just looks at this guy and says he's this. He goes through and watches the tape. So Thor, awesome job as always. Yes, sir.
I'll link that this article in the description and the video. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really quick, you mentioned the great state of Texas. Steve, did you happen to see the breakdown of NFL draft picks this year per state?
I did. I'm gonna throw this your way, Eric. So I saw it was 37 from Florida and 33 from Texas. However, we gave y'all some draft picks because like Kellen Mond went to IMG, but the first years before that, he's from Texas, from San Antonio. So we'll give you some draft picks. Now, admit if any state's going to beat Texas, it's going to be Florida. And so you know what, y'all won. Congratulations. But we did throw y'all a guy, maybe two. I don't know. But for sure, Kellen Mond.
See, now you know what, and I appreciate. And normally, Steve and I engage in this friendly banter of Texas versus Florida. Wasn't even where I was going to go with this one there, Steve. I want to hit you with this one on just a sheer wow. Did you see the breakdown? I don't know if you caught this or not. You caught the one of the states. 37 from Florida, correct? And of course, if you want to take Kellen Mond back, 36.
Exactly, yeah.
24 of those from Florida combined from Dade and Broward County. That means 24 kids from South Florida. I mean, of course, and I didn't even see from Palm Beach, so there may be an additional one or two from Palm Beach, but just Dade and Broward County. I believe Broward County had 14. Dade had 9. That's just in a 1-year draft. Can you imagine if you do that over 4 years? And listen, none of us are going to sit up here and try to tell kids, your be-all, end-all should be the NFL. Yeah. But if there's one place where you're living and it's like, you got a fair shot. I mean, that's 14 kids from one county. You do multiply that there. That's 48 kids over a 4-year span. That's insane, Steve. That's also bad math on my part. That's 56, not 48. But go ahead, Steve. Make sure I clarify that before I get called out.
That's always been the case. Like that pocket has always been just like NFL. Like it's not just like big time D1. Duh, it's expected. It's NFL, and you know what I mean. Texas has similar spots. Florida has spots.
Yeah.
Though, like I think the closest state to Texas and Florida was, I think, Georgia. I think had like 21.
I think Georgia had a fair amount. Yeah.
Louisiana had a good amount. I think Louisiana and Georgia were above California now, which
normally isn't the case, but yeah,
But in a way, it kind of makes sense, right? If football is so important where we live in the South, then it's probably going to be a little better, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, no. I listen. You know me. I'm gonna agree with you there, but I just want to run that one by. That's just, 24 kids from South Florida. That's incredible. Want to go ahead and transition really quick into the 2022 draft to wrap this one up. And like we mentioned, we're gonna go ahead, take a couple episodes, just do a couple fun things. We'll do a little draft talk. Take a break from the quarterback competitions, and it's right now. It's summertime, so definitely want to give that a little bit of time to rest. If we come back and we have some little more solid foundation. So we're going to talk a little bit of draft here. Then also next episode, we'll have some fun probably with our guy, Joe Broback. Joe, I'm assuming Broback will be able to make time for us. He's a busy man, pumping out all the content that he is. He's a master of the college football Twitterverse and the content creation. He always has some fun, nice things that he's cooking up there. We're going to have him on the podcast. But as far as 2022, way too early. Steve, go ahead and run them down. We hit them one by one, see what you got.
Yeah, so here's the list. How about I'll just run through the names real quick, and then we can go touch on, however we want to touch on it.
I'm with it.
Order, but we got Carson Strong from Nevada, Desmond Ritter from Cincy, of course Malik Willis from Liberty, and even though he's Indy, we still throw him in the people who cover. Dylan Gabriel, if he decides to go, would be an option. If he decides to leave early, Billy Zappi from Western Kentucky. I have Caleb Ellaby from Western Michigan. Admittedly, the MAC isn't something we spend a ton of time on, but he's put up good numbers. Potentially Nick Starkel from San Jose State, had a good year last year. He has got a shot. Jake Hayner from Fresno State. I think he's a senior. Don't quote me, but if he is, he's got a shot if he has a good year. And then one that I don't think is likely is Grayson Mccall, because he's only going to be a redshirt sophomore, but he would be eligible, I believe.
Right.
So, crazy good year. Who knows? But I would imagine he's coming back for another year.
And actually, well, okay, that's where we get into technicalities. Grayson Mccall will be a redshirt freshman again because of the year rule, but because he is 3 years removed from his high school graduation, he would be eligible. So in a normal year, he'd be a redshirt sophomore. And it's actually funny because I've had to kind of get my mind into that when doing these previews for FIU. I'm sitting there writing R fresh or R soft again. Like, wait a minute, like it should go a year up. But yeah, just remember, the easiest way to remember it for those of you at home, everyone's eligibility from 2020 is their eligibility in 2021. in terms of the year class, right? So if you're a true freshman in 2020, you are a true freshman in 2021, and then your year will roll over in 2022. But yeah, so I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
No, that's the whole list I got. I don't know if you have anyone else to add, but I think we've got the smaller schools have a much better shot of having several guys drafted than we did, this past year.
I don't know. Listen, I think there are going to be a couple wild cards. You know what I mean? I think that's always the case because we led the show with Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, right? You wouldn't necessarily have thought those guys, and maybe, say have a shot at getting drafted, but no one would have said, first round. I feel like there's always going to be a guy or two like that. I think in Conference USA, I still don't necessarily see anyone like that right now because of the fact that it's a league that's still, kind of developing their quarterbacks. And even I would say, if you want to take a flyer on someone, a Frank Harris is like a dynamic athlete, but even then, he still hasn't really shown enough as a passer, or really, being healthy. But he definitely has the athleticism of a guy like Malik Willis at Liberty. You look at the American, like you mentioned, Dylan Gabriel, but even outside of that, I think it's still going to be a work in progress as far as G5 quarterbacks go. But do you have maybe a favorite? For me, or go ahead. Let me hear you go.
I don't
go first.
You got it.
Malik Willis. You were the first one.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of thought back to myself, the athleticism. I had a chance to see him play live twice last year. Yeah. Opening game at home against FIU and also the bowl game. And here's the big thing, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Steve. I think in Hugh Freeze's RPO system, it's a great system for a quarterback, and he executes it well. I think we're going to see a little bit more consistency as a passer, but and this is my NFL comp, if I may get ahead of myself, please. Bob Griffin.
Really?
I absolutely, RG3. I think his athleticism is that. And listen, Steve, do we need to remind the people of what type of athlete? RG3 was a track athlete.
100%. I think almost want to try to be in the Olympics, like in the 100.
Right. RG3 was that level of athletic at quarterback, and I'm going to be honest. I think he's on that level. I think that's the best compliment. Do you have, when you talk about Willis, you have a guy?
I have one right off the top of my head. That's a good comp. Willis is freaky athletic. I think anyone that's been keeping up with us knows how high we've been on Willis. Even a few podcasts ago, I said, I think he's a first-round pick. And now he's finally getting some publicity. There's an article that came out in The Athletic saying Malik Willis is one of these potential top guys. I really like Carson Strong from Nevada. I for sure think he has a big future and a good chance to be drafted fairly high if he has a good year. He's finally starting to get some recognition. Even Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati is starting to get some recognition. Those three quarterbacks, I believe, are ranked in the top 10 for the 2020 class by whatever publication that just put something out. So that was nice to see three, even though Liberty is not a group of five, but three of the non-Power 5 quarterbacks be in the top 10. Dylan Gabriel is not in there. If he was a senior, I would imagine that they would have had him in there. But I think Desmond Ridder, if he does what he did last year, and Carson Strong does what he did last year, and Malik Willis does what he did last year, they're all fairly high drafted quarterbacks in my opinion. And anyone after that, I think would take a huge year. Like Starkville will take a big year. Bailey Zappi take a huge year at Western Kentucky, right? Like Dylan Gabriel would leave after the 1 year and the new offense, but if he has a crazy astronomical year, maybe he leaves early too. I don't know. But my three front runners are Malik Willis, Carson Strong, and Desmond Ridder for the smaller school quarterbacks, if you will.
Yeah, and my thing on Malik Willis is this. The reason I compare him to RG3, and people tend to forget because RG3 was banged up and is kind of, for lack of a better phrase, he's gangly, kind of a gangly framed kid. But he's 6'3", 220. Like RG3 is a big guy. He just is, long arms, long limbs, like looks like a sprinter, So but that's why I give the comp to Malik Willis to RG3, I should say, because Malik Willis is probably a bit thicker than him. Malik Willis is probably legit 215, 220, but he's about 6'6". The only other comp I can think of, and I didn't think this was fair, was a Donovan McNabb, but Donovan McNabb, in my opinion, was never the athlete. And listen, Donovan McNabb was a great athlete, but, can play college basketball and football. But, Malik Willis, different level, in my opinion.
Yeah, McNabb, very good athlete, but he didn't have that like explosiveness, able to accelerate top speed real quick like Malik Willis has, RJ3 of course had.
Absolutely. Want to go and hit on one quick transfer before we get out of here, and that's N'Kosi Perry, the kid out of Ocala Vanguard High School, 4-star recruit, started 11 games at Miami. I believe my math is correct with the 11 games, but definitely had significant playing time, significant playing experience at UM. Is heading to Florida Atlantic. Well, that's a quarterback competition, a quarterback spot that we've talked about a decent amount. So we won't go rehash a quarterback competition like we mentioned until things a little further along. But just what are your thoughts overall on that landing spot for him? And just the fact that he'll have 2 years of eligibility with Willie Taggart.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think not a bad pickup. And I'm sure you have some, I think you told me maybe recently that move was kind of expected maybe. But especially with Willie Taggart facing N'Kosi Perry when he was at Florida State. And I think Perry even won that game when they played when he was when Perry was still at Miami and Taggart was at Florida State. So, he's seen him play before, knows what he brings to the table. So just again, one of those guys who had some good showings and then, would have games where he's completing passes under 50% completion percentage. So, but, worth taking. And if you surround him with some playmakers, I think he can probably do a decent job. It's an interesting competition, though. I know we're not getting into it, but it's an interesting competition.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And with N'Kosi, the thing, in my opinion, I had a chance to really see his first extended playing experience against an FBS opponent. That came against FIU, 2018, 31-17 victory for the Hurricanes at Hard Rock Stadium. And he always showed the physical tools, just the consistency. That completion percentage is hovering somewhere around 54%. That's got to go up. And I think in Willie Taggart's offense, that's, has the potential. And here's the big thing. I think the completion percentage has the potential to go up, but here's the big thing. Michael Johnson Jr., probably a project, right? A talented guy, 4-star recruit, son of the offensive coordinator there, probably a project guy. Javian Posey, probably a project guy, right? Willie Taggart Jr., same thing. When you look at N'Kosi Perry, he is the most experienced quarterback on that roster. And from a sheer talent perspective, he's someone who you can pencil in and say, all right, we have our guy who we expect to make all the plays, as opposed to, all right, we're trying to find ways to facilitate offense through him to get him comfortable. And that you would think is a fair assessment, right?
Yeah, I think that's true, especially the quarterback play FAU had last year. Like, they would have taken the 54 completion percentage that N'Kosi Perry brings over because he's going to throw some bombs. He's going to throw some, you know what I mean? There's a threat of a vertical attack. So I think that's a fair thing to say.
No doubt about it. So we're going to go and bring this pod to a close. As we mentioned, next podcast, we'll go ahead and find our friend from old Minnesota. Broback's going to get a laugh out of this when he hears my Minnesota accent, Joe Broback. Very thick Minneapolis accent. Steve, you got anything else, or are you good?
I was going to say, I don't know. I forget if you told him the game we're going to play or not, but we're going to have Broback do we're going to have him put the amount of money on each player so people can get mad at him and not at us. Correct?
Make sure you specify that it's Joe Broback at Joe Broback. You're going to get upset at on Twitter. But as always, you can find us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at EricCHenry _. You can find Steve on Twitter at STEVEN Hamner, HAMNER. You can find this podcast on Twitter at QB Spotlight. You can find it on YouTube, same at QB Spotlight. You can find Steve's work. Where else can you find it, Steve? Oh, my Reach training. What else am I going to shout out here? I want to make sure I get all the shout outs here. Reach training, plug Reach training really quick.
Yeah, throw in, Reach training. So it's what we do. It's a nonprofit, and we give the same services we give to our pro athletes to kids that would not be able to afford that. So Reach training. If anyone's interested in more detail about what that is, let me know. I'm always happy to talk about it.
I caught Steve off guard with the shameless plug. He is above the shameless plug. I am not. And with that being said, you can find my work at Underdog Dynasty, SB Nation's home for G5 football coverage. Find this podcast, Podbean, iTunes. Podbean hosts it. You can find it Apple iTunes. Just punch in, QB Spotlight. You'll find it. And last but not least, NFLDraftDiamonds.com. DraftDiamonds.com on Twitter. They do a phenomenal job spotlighting draft diamonds, and you can find a lot of the kids that we talk about on their platform. NFLDraftDiamonds.com, Draft Diamonds on Twitter. Thank you for listening. happy football reliving as we're in the summer. So go out and, crack open a beer, enjoy the weather, rewatch an old football game. I mean, listen, we were short of the full football season this year. So you have all the liberty to go and, pop open a beer and watch a game from 2019, 2020. And we'll try to get you prepared as best we can for 2021. Thank you all for listening. Please join us next time.